Sometimes life pushes you into loneliness not to punish you, but to reveal the version of you that was always meant to rise. There comes a moment when you look around and no one is clapping for you, no one is guiding you, no one is saving you, and that moment feels terrifying. But what you don't realize is that this is the exact moment when your real strength is born. In Buddhism, there is a truth. When the world becomes quiet, your inner teacher finally begins to speak. And in that silence, something powerful happens. You stop waiting for others to carry you, and you discover you were built to walk on your own legs all along. Today, you will learn Buddhist lessons on how to become strong even when you have no one to lean on, how to walk alone with purpose, and how to build a life so solid that no betrayal, no abandonment, and no silence can ever break you again. 1. Life leaves you alone, so you finally hear the truth you've been avoiding. Many people automatically assume that being alone is a punishment, a sign that something is wrong with them, or that life has abandoned them. But the truth is often the opposite. Solitude is not life being cruel, it is life becoming honest. It is one of the loudest wake-up calls you will ever receive, because when everything becomes quiet, you finally begin to hear what you were too distracted to notice before. As long as people were around you, comforting you, validating you, entertaining you, or even distracting you, you never had to face the deeper truths hiding underneath your daily routine. You never had to confront your fears, your insecurities, your emotional habits, or the parts of you that needed healing. People kept you busy, and noise kept you numb. But when people stop checking on you, when messages stop arriving, when you are no longer surrounded by the familiar presence of others, your world becomes still. And in that stillness, truths you have been avoiding finally rise to the surface. You start to notice how much you depended on others, not just for companionship, but for your sense of worth. You depended on their validation to feel confident, on their attention to feel seen, on their comfort to feel safe, and on their reassurance to feel strong. Without realizing it, you made other people responsible for emotions you were meant to learn to manage on your own. So when those external sources disappear, it feels painful at first, because the silence exposes all the wounds you never treated. But this exposure is not meant to destroy you, it is meant to rebuild you. Solitude becomes the mirror that shows you the version of yourself you've been avoiding. It reveals the areas where you relied too heavily on others, where you abandoned your own needs, where you forgot your own power. Instead of breaking you, this moment is designed to awaken you. It forces you to meet yourself honestly, maybe for the first time in your life. In this quiet period, something powerful happens. You begin to strengthen qualities that constant company kept weak. Your inner voice, your intuition, your independence, your emotional balance, your ability to make decisions without asking 10 different people for approval. You begin to develop clarity because there is no one left to confuse you. You begin to develop self-awareness because no one is left to distract you. And you finally understand that the pain you felt wasn't truly caused by loneliness. It was caused by depending on the wrong people to fill a space inside you that only self-understanding and inner strength were ever meant to fill. Life leaves you alone not because you are unworthy, but because it wants to remove the noise so you can finally hear your own truth. And once you hear that truth, you become someone who no longer fears standing alone, because you discover you were always capable of standing on your own life, just needed to make sure you realized it. 2. People leave when you start growing because your growth threatens their comfort. One of the most confusing and painful experiences in life is watching people you cared for slowly distance themselves the moment you begin to change. You might think you did something wrong, or that you became difficult to love, but the truth is much deeper. People often pull away not because you failed, but because you started growing in ways that made them uncomfortable. When you become more self-aware, you naturally begin setting boundaries. When you heal, you stop tolerating behaviors you once accepted. When you gain confidence, you stop seeking approval the way you used to. And when you start choosing a higher version of yourself, the relationships that were built on your older, weaker version begin to shake. Your growth acts like a mirror, reflecting back to people the parts of themselves they haven't dealt with yet. Some feel judged even though you've said nothing. Some feel exposed even though you remain silent. Some feel threatened because your progress highlights their lack of progress. So instead of growing with you, they retreat. Buddhism teaches that attachment to the old self is one of the main causes of suffering. The same is true for the people around you. When you evolve, they are forced to confront the fact that they are staying the same. Some people were comfortable when you were insecure because your insecurity made their insecurity easier to live with. Some liked you better when you needed them because it gave them a sense of importance that had nothing to do with genuine love. Others preferred the version of you that said yes to everything, expected nothing, questioned nothing, and remained predictable. But when you start building discipline, when you start valuing your peace, when you start protecting your time, when you start focusing on your goals, your presence changes. You no longer play small to make others feel big. You no longer break yourself to keep relationships alive. You no longer silence your truth to protect people who never protected yours. As you grow, people show their true attachment not to you, but to the version of you that benefited them. Their distance is not a sign that your growth is wrong, but that it is working. It is revealing who was aligned with your soul and who was aligned only with your convenience. Some people will say, "You've changed," as if it's a flaw, but what they really mean is that you stopped being someone they could take advantage of. They preferred the version of you who ignored your boundaries, who didn't know your worth, who couldn't stand alone. But strength always exposes weakness. Growth always exposes stagnation. And when you start to break your old patterns, you break the unspoken agreements others had with your past self. This is why loneliness often appears during transformation. The universe removes the people who cannot walk the next chapter with you. It clears your path not because you are unlovable, but because staying surrounded by the wrong people would delay your evolution. Instead of resisting their departure, see it as protection. Let those who are threatened by your growth leave, because their absence is making space for people who align with your strength, not your weakness. And as painful as it feels, this loss is not truly a loss. It is a graduation. You are stepping into a version of yourself that not everyone is meant to witness. Some chapters require solitude, because the person you are becoming needs silence to rise. People don't leave because you changed. They leave because you stopped shrinking. 3. The pain you feel right now is not a breakdown. It's the birth of self-reliance. When life suddenly removes the people you used to lean on, the first emotion that rises is pain, heavy, overwhelming, and almost suffocating. It feels like the ground beneath you has cracked open, like you are carrying all the weight of your emotions alone. Like every fear you once buried is now standing in front of you, demanding to be faced. Your mind begins to panic, telling you that you're breaking, that you're losing control, that you can't handle this by yourself. But what you don't realize is that this pain is not a signal of collapse. It is the beginning of your transformation. It is the first breath of a new version of you that your old life was too small to hold. For years you leaned on others without even noticing it. You looked for reassurance when you doubted yourself. You looked for comfort when you felt lost. You looked for validation when you felt insecure. You looked for emotional rescue every time your heart felt too heavy. And because those people were there, you never learned how strong you actually were. They weren't bad people, some genuinely cared, but their presence prevented you from discovering your own strength. So when life removes those support systems, the sudden loneliness feels like punishment, when in reality it is training. It is the universe forcing you to use emotional muscles you never exercised before. Pain is simply the friction that appears when you start growing into someone new. Buddhist teachings explain that suffering is often a sign of internal attachment being loosened. When you lose someone you depended on, your heart feels like it is losing stability. But what is actually happening is that your inner strength is being forced to activate. The pain you feel is not trying to destroy you. It is trying to wake you up. It is trying to teach you that you can survive without the emotional crutches you once believed were necessary. Every tear you wipe by yourself builds emotional resilience. Every moment you calm your own thoughts strengthens your inner voice. Every night you fight through without anyone comforting you develops a new layer of self-trust. You are not breaking, you are building. Pain becomes your teacher because it reveals where you were depending on others instead of developing yourself. It shows you the places where your emotional foundation was weak. It shows you the habits you used to escape your feelings. It shows you the parts of your heart that need healing. People can't teach you these lessons, only solitude can. Because when you are alone, you cannot run. You cannot hide behind distractions, noise, or company. You are forced to sit with your emotions, to understand them, to process them, and to grow through them. And the moment you stop fighting the pain and start listening to it, everything changes. You begin to realize that the strength you were begging others to give you is already inside you, waiting to be awakened. And slowly, the heaviness in your chest begins to shift. Not because your situation changed, but because you changed in response to it. The loneliness that once terrified you becomes a space where you rebuild yourself. The silence that once felt empty becomes a place of clarity. The pain that once felt unbearable becomes proof that you are evolving. You start trusting your own decisions. You start believing in your ability to survive. You start relying on yourself, not out of fear, but out of confidence. This is how strong people are made, not through comfort, but through surviving the nights they thought would break them. One day, you will look back and realize that this painful moment, this exact moment, when you had no one to lean on, was the moment your inner power was born. This is not a breakdown. This is your awakening. This is your rebirth into a version of yourself that no abandonment, no silence, and no betrayal will ever be able to break again. 4. Not everyone you love is good for your future, and strength means letting them go. One of the most painful truths in life is realizing that some of the people you love the most are actually the ones holding you back. It doesn't happen suddenly. It happens slowly, quietly, over time. You start noticing how certain people drain your energy, how they never celebrate your growth, how they only come to you when they need something, and how your relationship with them is built more on habit than on genuine connection. But because your heart is loyal, you ignore the signs. You give chance after chance. You force yourself to stay because walking away feels selfish. You tell yourself that things will change, that they will finally understand you, that they will grow with you. Yet deep inside, a small voice keeps whispering, "This person cannot go where you are heading." We often attach ourselves to people because they were there during our weakest moments, or because we fear loneliness, or because we confuse familiarity with love. But Buddhist wisdom teaches that attachment is the root of suffering. Not love, not compassion, not kindness, but attachment. And attachment is what keeps you tied to relationships that are quietly destroying your peace. Some people are not bad. They are simply not meant to walk with you into the next chapter of your life. Your souls were aligned for a moment, not for eternity. And when you try to drag them into a future that they are not emotionally, mentally, or spiritually ready for, you create suffering for both of you. Letting go feels painful because the heart doesn't understand logic. It understands memories, emotions, comfort, and connection. But staying in the wrong connection is far more painful in the long run. You begin to shrink yourself to keep the relationship peaceful. You silence your thoughts to avoid conflict. You abandon your own needs just to maintain the bond. You betray your future in order to protect your past. And slowly, without noticing, you begin to lose yourself. Real strength is recognizing this moment. Real strength is admitting that you cannot grow while staying chained to relationships built on your old self. When you begin healing, your energy changes. Your boundaries become stronger. Your standards rise. Your expectations mature. This evolution naturally creates distance from people who are not growing with you. Some will accuse you of changing. Some will say you became cold. Some will say you think too much of yourself. But none of this is true. What is true is that you are becoming more aware of what you allow into your life. People who once benefited from your weakness will always see your growth as disrespect. People who relied on your lack of boundaries will always see your strength as a threat. And people who preferred the broken version of you will always fear the healed version of you. It takes incredible courage to let go of someone you still love, not out of anger, but out of clarity. You are choosing to protect your peace. You are choosing to prioritize your growth. You are choosing to stop begging for the love, support, or respect that should have been given freely. Letting go is not an act of cruelty. It is an act of deep self-respect. It is saying, I love you, but I love my future more. I care for you, but I cannot sacrifice my growth for the sake of staying comfortable with you. And when you finally walk away, something profound happens. You begin reclaiming the pieces of yourself you abandoned. You start hearing your own thoughts again. You start feeling lighter. You start breathing deeper. You start realizing that the pain of letting go is temporary, but the pain of staying in the wrong relationship lasts forever. With time, you understand that letting someone go does not always mean you lost them. It means you made space for someone better. Someone aligned with your growth, not your wounds. Someone who respects your boundaries, not your weaknesses. Someone who loves your evolution, not your stagnation. And perhaps most importantly, you realize that letting go was never about losing them. It was about finding yourself again. Because every person you release creates room for a stronger, wiser, clearer version of you to rise. You cannot become the person you are meant to be while holding on to people who belong to your past. Strength is not in holding on. Strength is in knowing when the story has ended, closing the chapter gracefully, and walking into your future with peace in your heart and power in your steps. 5. The world respects you only when you respect yourself first. One of the greatest sources of suffering is expecting people to treat you better than you treat yourself. Many of us go through life wondering why people ignore our feelings, why they cross our boundaries, why they don't take us seriously, or why they walk all over us. But the truth is that the world mirrors the way you show up for yourself. If you tolerate disrespect, others will assume you deserve it. If you constantly shrink yourself, people will believe you are small. If you abandon your own needs, people will learn to abandon them too. Respect doesn't start outside. It starts inside. It begins with the standards you set, the boundaries you enforce, and the way you speak to your own soul. You cannot teach someone to value you while you are still treating yourself like an afterthought. When you rely on others for validation, you become emotionally fragile. You begin molding your personality to please people. You stop expressing your true feelings because you fear conflict. You say yes when everything inside you is screaming no. You allow people to stay in your life even when they drain your energy and sabotage your growth. And without realizing it, you send the world a silent message. I'm willing to accept less than I deserve. This is why Buddhism teaches that self-respect is a form of spiritual armor. It protects your energy, your heart, and your path. When you respect yourself deeply, the universe responds by removing people who don't align with that new frequency of strength. But there is a part of this lesson that most people don't understand. Self-respect isn't loud. It isn't about ego, pride, or showing off. It is quiet, calm, and unwavering. It shows in the decisions you make, the people you choose, the things you tolerate, and the actions you take when no one is watching. Self-respect is when you stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. It is when you stop giving multiple chances to someone who keeps showing you the same patterns. It is when you walk away from conversations that drain your spirit instead of feeding your peace. It is when you stop lowering your standards because you fear being alone. Self-respect is choosing yourself even when it scares you. There is a powerful transformation that happens the moment you begin respecting yourself. Your energy changes and people notice. You start speaking with more confidence. You begin moving with more intention. Your presence becomes stronger, not because you try harder, but because you stop trying for the wrong people. You no longer chase anyone who chooses to leave. You no longer beg for attention or love. You no longer allow people to treat you like an option. Your silence becomes purposeful. Your boundaries become firm, and your choices begin to reflect your worth instead of your insecurity. People react to this change in different ways. Some will respect you more because they realize you have finally risen to your true potential. They will treat your boundaries with care. They will honor your presence. They will adjust themselves because they want to remain in your life. These are the people you keep. Others, however, will say you've become distant, cold, or selfish. But what they really mean is, you are no longer someone I can use, manipulate, or control. These people will naturally fade away, and their exit is a blessing, not a loss. Losing people who don't respect you is a form of winning. Respecting yourself doesn't mean you think you're better than others. It means you finally understand that you are not less than anyone. It means you refuse to continue abandoning yourself for relationships that do not honor your worth. It means choosing peace over approval, truth over comfort, and growth over attachment. And once you master this, something beautiful happens. The world shifts around you. Opportunities that were once out of reach begin to open. People treat you differently. They become more cautious with your heart, more thoughtful with their words, more careful with your time. You no longer attract those who feed on weakness. You attract those who recognize strength. In the end, self-respect is not just a habit, it is a declaration. A message to the universe saying, I know my worth, and I will not settle for anything less. And the universe responds by sending you people, experiences, and circumstances that honor that declaration. The world respects you only when you respect yourself first. And once you learn this truth, you will never again allow anyone to treat you in a way that makes your soul shrink. You will walk with a confidence that cannot be taken away, because it is built from within, not borrowed from others. Luke, your future depends on the habits you build when no one is watching. There is a moment in everyone's life when they realize that success is not built in public, it is built in private. The world only sees the results, but the world never sees the mornings you forced yourself to wake up when you were exhausted, the nights you stayed up learning when others were sleeping, the discipline you built when your mind was begging you to quit. When you have no one to lean on, your habits become your only source of guidance, structure, and strength. This is why the habits you create in silence determine the quality of life you will live years from now. They shape your identity far more than motivation ever can. Motivation is temporary. Discipline is permanent. Most people believe strength comes naturally when life becomes easier. But the truth is that strength is built through consistent actions, repeated quietly, long before anyone acknowledges your efforts. When no one is supporting you, when no one is cheering for you, when no one believes in your dreams, that is when your discipline matters the most. Those small, repeated choices become the foundation you stand on. One day of effort changes nothing, but 1 year of consistency transforms everything. Every time you choose growth over comfort, you become someone the old version of you would not even recognize. The painful part is that no one sees your private battles. No one sees the internal war you fight when your mind feels tired, when your heart feels heavy, and when you feel like you are carrying your entire life on your shoulders. But this is where true transformation begins. This is where you develop self-control, emotional stamina, and mental resilience. You stop relying on feelings and start relying on your commitment. And that shift changes everything. Buddhism teaches that the mind becomes strong when it is trained, not when it is indulged. The habits you build when you are alone are the training ground for your future self. When you are surrounded by people, it's easy to fall into laziness, distraction, and comparison. But when you walk alone, you are forced to decide who you want to be without external influence. You learn to discipline your mind because there is no one to remind you. You learn to control your impulses because there is no one to stop you. You learn to hold yourself accountable because there is no one to blame. This self-accountability becomes your superpower. It becomes the invisible strength that separates you from the average person who relies on motivation, praise, or external pressure to move. There is a reason the most successful and strongest people in the world talk about the importance of routine. Routine is not boring. Routine is what frees you from chaos. Routine gives your life direction when emotions try to pull you in different directions. Routine protects your mind from falling back into old patterns, and routine gives you stability when the world around you feels uncertain. When you create strong habits like waking up early, training your body, feeding your mind, limiting distractions, practicing mindfulness, and staying focused on your goals, you build a lifestyle that supports your future instead of sabotaging it. The beauty of this process is that discipline creates confidence. Every time you follow through on a promise you made to yourself, you begin to trust yourself more. You begin to see that you are capable, reliable, and stronger than your excuses. And once self-trust grows, your entire life changes. You stop depending on people to believe in you because you finally believe in yourself. You stop waiting for signs because your daily habits become the signs. You stop chasing shortcuts because you understand that the long path is where real strength is built. People who depend on others for motivation crumble when left alone. But people who train themselves to stay disciplined in solitude rise exponentially. They become unstoppable because their progress does not rely on external energy. Their engine is internal. Their power source is within. This is why the habits you build when no one is watching are sacred. They determine where you will stand when everyone is watching. Your future self will either thank you for today's discipline or suffer for today's weakness. And the most empowering truth is this: you don't need a perfect plan. You don't need the approval of others. You don't need everything figured out. You just need to start showing up for yourself every single day. Slowly, quietly, consistently. And one day, without even realizing it, you will look around and see a life you built brick by brick through your private discipline. A life shaped not by luck, not by support, not by chance, but by the strength you created in silence. This is the secret. Your habits are building a future version of you that is far stronger than the person you are today. And that version of you will be grateful that you kept going, even when no one else believed you could. 7. You become unshakable the day you realize you are all you need. There comes a point in every person's life when the noise of the world begins to fade, not gradually, but suddenly, sharply, almost violently. People who once promised to stand by you grow distant. Conversations that once felt warm begin to feel forced. The support you depended on evaporates. And in the middle of all this, you are left face to face with something you tried to avoid your entire life: yourself. In the beginning, it feels terrifying. It feels like being thrown into a dark room without a map, without guidance, without a familiar voice telling you what to do or who to be. You look around and realize that the safety nets you relied on are gone, and the people you leaned on are no longer holding your weight. But it is in this exact moment, this moment of forced stillness, this moment of confrontation, that the seed of unshakable strength is planted. Most people spend their entire lives believing they need others to complete them. They look for emotional support, validation, approval, direction, love, reassurance, and identity from people who may or may not have the capacity to offer it. When you are surrounded by others, it is easy to believe that your power comes from connection. But when the room empties and the voices disappear, you suddenly realize that your strength was never supposed to be borrowed. It was supposed to be built from within. This realization is painful, but it is one of the most transformative experiences a human being can go through. Buddhism teaches that suffering often arises from misunderstanding your own nature. You believe you are weak because you have always had someone to fall back on. You believe you are fragile because you never allowed yourself to carry your own emotional weight. You believe you are incomplete because you confused attachment with love and dependency with security. But when life removes everyone from your path, it is not abandoning you, it is awakening you. It is forcing you to see that the strength you were desperately searching for in others was quietly waiting inside you, untouched and unexplored. The journey toward becoming unshakable begins the day you stop expecting people to save you. You stop waiting for someone to understand your pain. You stop hoping someone will show up and make your life easier. You stop expecting others to give you the love you never learned to give yourself. And when these expectations fall away, something miraculous happens. You begin to take responsibility for your own growth. You begin to take ownership of your own healing. You begin to trust yourself in ways you never imagined. This self-trust becomes the foundation of your new life. At first, walking alone feels like punishment. But with time, it becomes your greatest advantage. When you walk alone, you no longer have to dilute your personality to match the expectations of others. You stop bending your truth to maintain relationships that do not honor your growth. You stop shrinking your dreams to make others comfortable. You stop lowering your standards just to avoid losing people who were never meant to stay. The loneliness that once felt heavy starts to feel peaceful. The silence that once scared you becomes a sanctuary. You begin to understand that being alone and being lonely are two completely different things. Loneliness is the absence of others. Solitude is the presence of yourself. And when you finally learn to enjoy your own presence, you unlock a level of inner power that cannot be shaken by anyone or anything. You become emotionally independent, not cold, not disconnected, but balanced. You no longer need someone to validate your worth because you see it clearly. You no longer chase anyone's attention because you understand that your energy is valuable. You no longer rely on others to hold you together because you have learned to hold your own soul with steadiness and grace. People come and go, but your peace remains. Situations rise and fall, but your stability stands firm. Problems appear and disappear, but your mind stays centered. This is what it means to become unshakable. One of the most profound shifts happens when you stop fearing loss. You stop fearing the end of relationships because you know you will not collapse without them. You stop fearing the uncertainty of life because you trust your ability to adapt. You stop fearing abandonment because you realize that being left by others does not mean being left by life. In fact, every time someone walked away, life was walking you closer to yourself. When you reach this level of awareness, everything changes. You begin to move differently. You speak differently. You make decisions based on your truth rather than your fears. You no longer ask, "Will people support me?" but instead ask, "Does this align with my soul?" You no longer wonder, "What if I lose them?" because you know the only real loss is losing yourself. Strength like this is not loud. It does not need to announce itself. It does not need to prove anything. It is a quiet confidence, a grounded presence, a calm power. It is the way you carry yourself through storms without falling apart. It is the way you face uncertainty without panicking. It is the way you trust the process, even when you cannot see the outcome. And this strength is built, refined, and perfected through moments of isolation. Life separates you from others, not to weaken you, but to strip away the illusions that made you forget who you really are. Each moment you survive alone, each emotional battle you win without support, each night you wipe your own tears and still get up the next morning. These moments carve strength into your soul the way pressure shapes diamonds. They turn your vulnerability into wisdom. They turn your pain into power. They turn your loneliness into independence. And they turn your existence into something sacred. Eventually, you reach a place where you are no longer moved by the things that once shattered you. You no longer respond to disrespect. You no longer tolerate inconsistency. You no longer engage with people who drain your spirit. You no longer cling to relationships that hold you back. And you no longer apologize for choosing yourself. You move through life with a steady heart, not because everything is perfect, but because you are no longer afraid of imperfection. You are no longer afraid of being alone. You now understand that solitude does not break you, it reveals you. This is what it means to become unshakable, to arrive at a version of yourself that cannot be destroyed by abandonment, rejection, silence, or loss. To reach a level of inner peace that does not depend on external conditions. To walk forward with a quiet certainty that no matter what happens, you will rise again. You will rebuild again. You will choose yourself again. And the most beautiful part of this transformation is realizing that the person you were searching for your entire life, the strong one, the reliable one, the wise one, the grounded one, was always you. You were the one you were waiting for. You were the one meant to rise. And once you understand this truth deeply, you become a force that life cannot break. Because now, finally, you are all you need. 8. Your loneliness is not emptiness, it is the space where your new life begins. There is a misunderstanding that follows many people their whole lives. The belief that loneliness equals emptiness. They think that being alone means something is missing, something is wrong, something is incomplete. But this belief is born from fear, not truth. In reality, loneliness is not a void. It is a vast, open space where transformation begins. It is the silence that gives your soul room to breathe. It is the doorway through which your new self enters. And the moment you stop fearing loneliness, you begin to understand its sacred purpose. Most people spend their entire lives running from loneliness. They jump from relationship to relationship, friendship to friendship, distraction to distraction, always keeping themselves surrounded by noise so they never have to sit with their own thoughts. They fear silence because silence exposes truth. They fear being alone because being alone requires them to face the parts of themselves they've been avoiding for years, the insecurity they never addressed, the pain they never healed, the dreams they never pursued, the boundaries they never set. But the universe, in its wisdom, often pulls everyone away from you, not to punish you, but to cleanse your path. It empties your surroundings so you can finally see what is meant to stay and what must go. Buddhist teachings explain that emptiness is not a lack of something, it is the potential for everything. A cup must be empty to be filled, a field must be cleared before new seeds can be planted, and a heart must be quiet before wisdom can enter. In the same way, your loneliness is not a sign that your life is falling apart. It is a sign that you are entering a new phase of growth. It is life removing distractions so you can hear your inner voice. It is life stripping away attachments so you can finally see yourself clearly. It is life preparing you for the person you are becoming, not the person you were. What feels like isolation is often initiation. When you begin to grow spiritually, emotionally, or mentally, the universe naturally separates you from crowds, friendships, situations, and relationships that no longer match your frequency. You begin noticing how certain people drain your energy. You begin feeling uneasy in places where you once felt comfortable. You begin craving peace more than company. This shift is not random. It is the sign that you are rising. And rising always requires space. You cannot elevate while carrying dead weight. You cannot evolve while holding on to who you used to be. So loneliness becomes the bridge between your old life and your new one. There is a moment, often unexpected, when solitude becomes your teacher. It shows you how much strength you have left undiscovered. It shows you how much clarity you can access when you stop seeking advice from people who cannot understand your path. It shows you how powerful your intuition becomes when you silence the opinions of others. It shows you the difference between people who were meant to guide you temporarily and the deeper wisdom meant to guide you permanently. In this silence, you begin meeting yourself, the real self, the self beneath the noise, the self beneath the expectations of others, the self who has been waiting patiently for you to return. Your loneliness becomes a mirror. It reflects your wounds, but it also reflects your gifts. It reveals your fears, but it also reveals your courage. It shows you how much you depended on others, but it also shows you that you are capable of far more than you ever realized. Every time you sit with your own thoughts without running from them, you grow. Every time you calm your own heart without relying on someone else, you strengthen. Every time you lift yourself instead of waiting for rescue, you evolve. There is a version of you being built right now, a version so grounded, so focused, so powerful, that the old you would not even recognize them. And here is the part most people never understand. The moment you stop resisting loneliness, loneliness transforms. What once felt like emptiness begins to feel like peace. What once felt heavy begins to feel grounding. What once felt scary becomes a state of clarity. Because loneliness is only painful when you believe you need others to feel whole. But solitude becomes liberating when you realize you were whole the entire time. The people who left you were never your completion. They were chapters. Their exit did not break you, it freed you. This realization is the turning point. You stop asking why people left. You stop replaying old memories. You stop blaming yourself for the distance. Instead, you begin asking deeper questions. Who am I becoming? What does my soul need? What is the life I want to build? What habits support my future? What relationships align with my growth? And slowly, answers begin rising from within you, not from the noise of others, but from the wisdom you carried your entire life without noticing. There is a sacred power in being alone because it removes the illusions you used to live under. You no longer pretend to be someone you're not just to be accepted. You no longer seek approval for every decision. You no longer silence your intuition to match the expectations of others. You begin to trust your own path, your own timing, your own purpose. And that trust becomes the foundation of your inner peace. In time, you understand the deeper truth. Your loneliness was never empty. It was preparation. The universe had to separate you from what you outgrew so you could expand into who you were meant to become. It had to quiet the world so your inner voice could finally be heard. It had to remove the people holding you back so you could rise without resistance. It had to give you solitude so you could rebuild your life with intention, clarity, and strength. And the most beautiful part, once you become comfortable in your own presence, you no longer fear losing anyone. You no longer cling to relationships out of desperation. You no longer tolerate disrespect. You no longer beg for attention or force connections that drain you. You begin choosing people from a place of strength, not fear. Love becomes sweeter because it is no longer filling a void. It is adding to a life already full. Relationships become healthier because you are no longer seeking rescue, you are seeking alignment. And your life becomes more peaceful because you finally understand that the person you needed most was always yourself. This is the secret. Loneliness is not the end of your journey, it is the beginning. It is the soil where your new identity grows. It is the silence where your wisdom awakens. It is the space where your future self is being born. And once you embrace this truth fully, you become someone who walks alone, not out of fear, not out of sadness, but out of deep, unshakable strength. Because now you know, your loneliness was never empty, it was the space your new life needed to enter. 9. The moment you stop chasing people, you start attracting the life you deserve. There is a turning point in every person's journey when they finally become tired. Tired of explaining themselves, tired of proving their worth, tired of holding on to relationships that were never balanced, tired of chasing people who only come close when it benefits them. For most of your life, you may have believed that effort is what keeps relationships alive. You believed that if you showed loyalty, if you showed patience, if you showed interest, if you showed understanding, the other person would eventually meet you halfway. But slowly, painfully, you begin to realize that some people only take, some only stay because you chase, and some relationships only survive as long as you're the one doing all the emotional labor. The moment you stop chasing, the truth reveals itself. The connections that are meant for you do not require you to run after them. This lesson is one of the hardest to learn, because chasing people often comes from an emotional wound we don't recognize at first. You may chase people because you fear abandonment, because you crave validation, because you believe losing someone means losing a part of yourself. You might think that your worth depends on the relationships you keep. You might feel that your identity is tied to how loved or accepted you are. And because of these hidden fears, you try desperately to hold on to anyone who shows the slightest amount of attention, affection, or interest. But Buddhism teaches that true suffering arises when we cling to what is not meant to stay. When you chase, you are not acting from strength, you are acting from fear. The moment you stop chasing, everything in your life shifts. At first, it feels uncomfortable. Your mind will try to pull you back into old habits. You will feel tempted to initiate conversations, check in on people, repair connections that were never built on equal effort, or reach out to those who already showed you their indifference. These urges appear because you have conditioned yourself to believe that peace comes from keeping others close. But slowly, as you resist the urge to chase, you begin to feel something new growing inside you, self-respect. A quiet strength starts forming in your chest. You start questioning why you ever believed you needed to run after someone who never ran after you. The powerful truth is this: when you stop chasing, you stop abandoning yourself. You stop betraying your own heart to protect people who never protected yours. You stop shrinking your needs, silencing your voice, and sacrificing your boundaries just to maintain a connection that doesn't nurture your soul. You begin to realize that chasing someone is a form of self-rejection. Every time you pursued someone who didn't value you, you were subconsciously saying, "My worth depends on your approval." But the moment you stop chasing, you reclaim your power. You send a new message to the universe: "I choose myself." And the universe responds to people who choose themselves. Connections that were draining begin to fade away. People who never valued you begin to fall silent. Situations that once caused anxiety lose their grip. What looked like loss is actually cleansing. What felt like rejection is actually redirecting you to something better. By refusing to chase, you break an old pattern that was keeping you stuck. You free yourself from emotional dependence. You give space for new blessings to enter. And you make room for relationships based on mutual respect rather than emotional desperation. In this space of non-chasing, something extraordinary happens. You begin attracting. Without forcing, without begging, without stretching yourself thin, you begin drawing people, opportunities, and energies that match your new level of self-respect. You attract people who see your worth without needing to be convinced. You attract people who reciprocate effort instead of taking advantage of it. You attract relationships where communication is natural, not forced, where energy is balanced, not won, sided, where love is given, not extracted. This is the magic of non-attachment. What is meant for you flows to you effortlessly. Buddhist philosophy teaches that when you stop clinging, life becomes lighter. You stop suffocating relationships with expectations. You stop fearing loss because you finally understand that what is aligned with your soul cannot be lost. You stop forcing connections because you trust that what belongs in your life will remain. And in this state of inner peace, your heart becomes magnetic. You attract better people not because you became more lovable, but because you no longer tolerate being unloved. Your energy becomes clearer, stronger, and more grounded. And grounded energy always attracts abundance. The moment you stop chasing others is also the moment you start chasing yourself, your growth, your purpose, your healing, your peace. You begin to invest the energy you used to give away into becoming the person you were meant to be. You start focusing on your goals instead of on temporary relationships. You start building your future instead of clinging to your past. You start choosing environments that nourish you, not environments that drain you. And the more you grow, the more you realize how much you were sacrificing just to keep certain people in your life. There comes a day when you look back and feel grateful for the distance, grateful for the silence, grateful for the ending of connections you once prayed would last. Not because those people were bad, but because losing them returned you to yourself. Because their exit freed the energy that was meant for your healing. Because their absence taught you the strength you didn't know you had. And because their chapter closing allowed a new chapter to begin, one where you are no longer a follower, but the author. Eventually, you reach a place where your peace is too valuable to trade, where your energy is too sacred to waste, where your heart is too wise to settle. You stop questioning whether people like you because you start focusing on whether you like yourself. You stop asking, "Why didn't they stay?" and start asking, "Why did I cling to someone who was never aligned with my soul's journey?" This shift in perspective transforms your entire life. It makes you emotionally independent, spiritually grounded, mentally clear, and deeply confident. Real strength is not in how hard you chase, it is in how gracefully you stop. It is in how beautifully you let go. It is in how bravely you trust that what is meant for you will always find its way. When you stop chasing, you don't lose people, you lose illusions. You lose emotional exhaustion. You lose self-betrayal. And in that space, you gain something priceless, a life aligned with your worth, a life shaped by your inner truth, a life filled with people who choose you without needing to be pursued. Because once you stop chasing the wrong things, the right things finally have room to enter. 10. The strongest version of you emerges when you stop asking for permission to live your own life. Most people live their lives inside invisible cages. Cages built not by metal, but by opinions, expectations, fears, and the need for approval. From childhood, you were conditioned to ask for permission. Permission to speak, permission to make choices, permission to dream, permission to express emotion. As you grew older, this conditioning followed you quietly. You began shaping your decisions around what others wanted, not what your soul wanted. You hesitated because you feared judgment. You compromised because you feared rejection. You stayed silent because you feared being misunderstood. This fear-based living slowly kills your spirit without you even noticing. But there comes a powerful moment in a person's journey when they suddenly realize, "I do not need anyone's permission to become who I am meant to be." And that moment marks the beginning of the strongest version of you. This awakening usually happens during a season of loneliness, when life strips away the people whose approval you depended on. When no one is there to tell you what to do or who to be, you are forced to ask yourself questions you've avoided for years. What do I want? What direction is my heart pulling me toward? What choices align with my peace? This internal questioning is frightening because you are stepping into a life where you no longer seek permission, only clarity. But this transition is the birth of true strength. You begin learning that the only approval you ever needed was your own, and that realization liberates your soul. For most of your life, you dimmed your light to make others comfortable. You lowered your standards to avoid losing relationships. You hid your talents because you didn't want to seem arrogant. You held back your opinions because you didn't want to cause conflict. You stopped chasing your dreams because you feared failure or criticism. You remained in places your soul outgrew because you feared disappointing people. But Buddhism teaches that the greatest suffering comes from living out of alignment with your true self. The moment you stop betraying your inner truth is the moment peace begins. And this peace doesn't come from others, it comes from living authentically. When you stop asking for permission, your energy shifts dramatically. Decisions that once felt heavy become lighter. You stop second-guessing every move. You stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop seeking validation from people who don't even validate themselves. Your confidence begins to grow not because anything outside changed, but because you finally stopped shrinking your identity to fit inside someone else's expectations. This inner expansion is the foundation of your new strength. You develop a level of self-respect that becomes non-negotiable. You stop tolerating disrespect, manipulation, and emotional inconsistency. You stop participating in conversations that drain your spirit. You stop allowing people to dictate your worth. Your boundaries become firmer, not out of anger, but out of clarity. But this transformation also comes with challenges. When you stop asking for permission, some people will feel threatened. They will accuse you of being selfish. They will say, "You've changed." They will try to guilt you into returning to your old patterns. This is because your new strength exposes their old comfort. Your growth forces them to confront their lack of growth. Your courage highlights their fear. Your independence threatens their control. But remember this: when you step into your power, you will lose many things: your fear, your insecurities, your people, pleasing habits, and the relationships that depended on your weakness. But what you gain is priceless: a life that belongs to you. There is a deep spiritual truth in Buddhism. Freedom begins the moment you stop seeking permission to exist. When you embrace this truth, your entire worldview changes. You begin trusting your intuition more than other people's opinions. You begin recognizing that you are allowed to outgrow people, environments, and identities. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to choose peace over familiarity. You are allowed to say no without guilt. You are allowed to choose yourself, even when others don't understand your decision. You are allowed to live a life that makes sense to your soul, not to the people watching from the outside. As this inner freedom grows, your loneliness begins to transform. It no longer feels like abandonment, it feels like alignment. You start realizing that walking alone is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign of clarity. It is evidence that you are no longer waiting for someone to approve your path before you walk it. You stop fearing being misunderstood because you finally understand yourself. You stop fearing rejection because you no longer reject your own truth. You stop fearing failure because you realize failure is simply redirection. Your life becomes your own masterpiece, not something shaped by others, but something you craft intentionally with your own hands and your own choices. Over time, this shift becomes visible in everything you do. You speak with more confidence, you walk with more purpose, you take risks you once avoided, you pursue dreams you once believed were impossible. You stop looking for signs outside yourself and begin following the compass within. You meet challenges with calm resilience instead of panic. You set boundaries without trembling. You make choices without seeking applause. You become the kind of person whose presence alone commands respect, not because you force it, but because your energy carries self-trust. The strongest version of you does not emerge when life becomes easy. It emerges when you stop waiting for someone else to allow you to rise. It emerges when you say, "This is my life. I will live it my way." It emerges when you take full ownership of your destiny. It emerges when you give yourself the permission you spent years begging from others. And once this version of you appears, your entire life transforms. You begin attracting relationships that honor your growth. You begin receiving opportunities that match your potential. You begin feeling emotions with more stability and clarity. You begin seeing challenges as teachers instead of threats. You begin creating a life that feels meaningful, peaceful, and deeply authentic. And perhaps the most beautiful part of this transformation is that you no longer fear losing people. You finally understand that those who walk away are not your loss. They are your liberation. They leave because their role in your story has ended. They leave because your new self no longer fits the shape of your old connections. They leave because your growth demands space. And in that space, the life you truly deserve begins to form. This is the profound truth. The strongest version of you emerges the day you stop asking for permission to be yourself. And once you embrace this truth, you become someone life cannot break, silence cannot weaken, and loneliness cannot defeat. You become someone who walks with grounded purpose, steady confidence, and a quiet, unshakable strength, because you finally belong to yourself. 11. You become truly free the moment you stop fighting what life is trying to teach you. There comes a point in every person's journey where they feel exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, and mentally. You feel drained from trying to control everything, from trying to fix everyone, from trying to understand situations that make no sense, from trying to hold together pieces of your life that want to fall apart. At first, you resist. You force things. You chase answers. You cling to people. You cling to the past. You cling to a version of yourself that is no longer alive. And in this resistance, life becomes heavy. Your heart becomes tired. Your mind becomes clouded. You begin to wonder why everything feels so difficult, why nothing flows anymore, why the world feels like it is pushing you into a corner. But here is the truth that most people don't learn until much later in life. The heaviness you feel is not life hurting you, it is life guiding you. It is life trying to teach you something. It is life trying to shift you into a new direction. It is life trying to remove what no longer aligns with your growth. But because you cling to your comfort zone, you mistake guidance for punishment. You think you are losing everything when in fact you are being redirected. You think people are abandoning you when in fact life is removing distractions. You think things are falling apart, but life is clearing a path. And the moment you stop resisting this process, your entire world transforms. Buddhist wisdom teaches that suffering arises from resistance, not from experience. It is not what happens to you that hurts the most. It is your refusal to accept what is happening. When you resist endings, they become painful. When you resist truth, it becomes overwhelming. When you resist change, it becomes chaotic. Life is always speaking, always guiding, always shaping you through subtle signs, through challenges, through silence, through emotional lessons. But when you cling too tightly to your expectations, you cannot hear what life is trying to say. You cannot grow into the person you are meant to become because your hands are too busy holding on to the person you used to be. Freedom begins the moment you stop fighting the natural flow of your journey. When you stop forcing situations to stay alive that have already served their purpose. When you stop begging for people to treat you in ways they are not capable of. When you stop trying to make certain relationships work out of fear of being alone. When you stop trying to control life and you start trusting it. This surrender is not weakness, it is the highest form of strength because it requires deep self-awareness, emotional maturity, and spiritual courage. It means understanding that not everything is meant to stay, not everyone is meant to walk with you, And not every loss is truly a loss. When you stop resisting, something incredible happens. Your life becomes clearer. You begin to see why certain people left. You begin to understand why certain paths closed. You begin to recognize why you were pushed into solitude. You begin to realize that life wasn't rejecting you. It was preparing you. The silence was meant to help you hear your inner voice. The loneliness was meant to help you build emotional independence. The heartbreak was meant to help you release unhealthy attachments. The confusion was meant to help you let go of your outdated identity. Every moment of discomfort was guiding you toward a life that aligns with your soul. When you accept this truth, your heart becomes lighter. You stop fighting what you cannot control. You stop questioning every hardship. You stop blaming yourself for things that were never your responsibility. Instead, you begin observing life with a calmer mind. You begin moving with more intention. You begin trusting that there is meaning behind every shift, even if you cannot see it yet. This trust becomes a powerful foundation. It frees you from anxiety because you no longer need to predict every outcome. It frees you from sadness because you no longer cling to the past. It frees you from fear because you understand that life has a rhythm and everything happens at the moment it is meant to. This acceptance does not make you passive, it makes you wise. You stop wasting energy on battles that are not yours. You stop forcing connections that drain your spirit. You stop waiting for people who are not walking toward you. You stop holding on to situations that are clearly complete. You begin valuing your peace more than your attachments. You begin valuing your growth more than your comfort. You begin valuing yourself more than the approval of others. And slowly, your life reshapes itself around this new strength. One of the most profound realizations you experience during this transformation is that the struggles you once resented were actually gifts. The heartbreak that shattered you taught you boundaries. The betrayal that broke your trust taught you discernment. The loneliness that terrified you taught you independence. The failure that humiliated you taught you resilience. The silence that confused you taught you clarity. Every painful experience carved wisdom into your soul, and without these lessons, you would not become the version of yourself that you are growing into now, stronger, wiser, more grounded, more aware, more aligned. Once you stop fighting life's lessons, life begins to cooperate with you. You stop swimming against the current and start moving with it. You stop gripping tightly to your suffering and begin allowing healing to flow in. You stop fearing the unknown and start trusting the unfolding. This surrender is what creates inner freedom. You become unshakable not because life stops challenging you, but because you stop being afraid of the challenges. You understand that everything you experience is shaping you, strengthening you, preparing you. And this is where the strongest version of you is born, in acceptance, not resistance. You begin to realize that life is not your enemy, it is your teacher. Pain is not a punishment, it is guidance. Loneliness is not abandonment, it is elevation. Endings are not failures, they are openings. And every time you embrace what life is trying to teach you instead of fighting it, you evolve. Eventually, you reach a point where peace becomes your natural state. Not because life is perfect, but because you are no longer controlled by fear. You trust the journey, you trust the timing, you trust yourself. And by doing so, you become the kind of person who moves through life with a calm, grounded, unshakable strength. You no longer collapse when you face hardship. You no longer lose yourself when people walk away. You no longer question your path when things don't go as planned. Because now you understand, life is not happening to you. Life is happening for you. And when you embrace this truth fully, you become truly free. 12. You transform the day you realize no one is coming to save you, and that's your power. For most of your life, whether you admit it or not, you carried a quiet hope that someone would eventually come into your life and make everything easier. Someone who would understand all your pain without you needing to explain it. Someone who would stay, guide you, protect you, motivate you, heal your heartbreak, help you carry your burdens, and make the world feel less heavy. This desire is deeply human. Everyone, at some point, wishes for a person who can fill the empty spaces, calm the storms inside, and make life feel safe again. But slowly, painfully, you begin to learn the truth. No one is coming, not in the way you hoped, not in the way you imagined, not in the way your heart desperately wanted. This realization feels like betrayal at first. It feels unfair. It feels lonely. It feels overwhelming. You wonder why life is so heavy, why no one sees your struggle, why no one reaches out, why the ones you supported disappear when you need them most. But this moment of deep disappointment, is not meant to destroy you. It is meant to awaken you. It is the moment when your old identity breaks and your real identity begins to rise. Because the truth is not that you are alone. The truth is that you are capable. The truth is not that you are abandoned. The truth is that life is redirecting you inward. The truth is not that no one cares. It is that you must care for yourself first. Buddhism teaches that liberation begins when you stop depending on external sources for your inner peace. As long as you believe someone else is responsible for saving you, you will remain trapped. Trapped in insecurity, trapped in expectation, trapped in disappointment. When you wait for someone else to fix your life, you give away your power. You weaken your own spirit. You silence your own wisdom. You abandon your own strength. And the universe will continue removing people from your life until you learn the one lesson you have avoided the longest. You are your own savior. Not because others cannot help, but because you cannot build your life on the unstable foundation of others' presence. The moment you finally accept this truth, something inside you shifts. At first, it feels like grief. You grieve the version of yourself that depended on others. You grieve the relationships you idealized. You grieve the fantasy of being rescued. But beneath that grief lies something extraordinary. A fierce, quiet, unbreakable strength that you did not know you had. A strength that was buried under years of seeking approval, seeking comfort, seeking someone to rely on. When you stop waiting, you start rising. When you stop hoping someone else will save you, you begin taking action for yourself. And this is where transformation truly begins. You begin making decisions that honor your future, not your fears. You begin taking responsibility for your healing. You begin building habits that strengthen your mind. You begin choosing environments that support your growth. You begin confronting your inner shadows instead of hiding behind people. You begin cleaning your emotional wounds instead of waiting for someone else to bandage them. You stop settling for half love, half effort, half attention. You begin protecting your peace, your boundaries, your energy. And each step you take toward independence adds another layer of power to your spirit. There is a profound freedom that comes from knowing that you can trust yourself to stand through any storm. You stop fearing abandonment because you learn you can survive without anyone. You stop fearing rejection because you no longer reject yourself. You stop fearing failure because you realize you can rebuild again and again. You stop fearing loneliness because you begin to enjoy your own presence. You stop fearing loss because you finally understand that nothing essential can ever be taken from you. What leaves your life was never meant to stay. What stays will not require chasing. This transformation is not loud. It does not happen through dramatic moments. It happens quietly, gradually, through small decisions you make each day. When you get up, even though your heart is heavy, when you choose discipline over comfort, when you walk away from people who drain your spirit, when you listen to your intuition instead of your fears, when you pursue goals that matter to you even when no one supports you, when you take accountability for your life instead of blaming your past, when you choose healing instead of repeating old patterns, these small acts of self-responsibility form the foundation of the strongest version of you. And slowly, You realize that being your own savior is not a burden, it is a blessing. Because now, your happiness doesn't disappear when people leave. Your confidence doesn't collapse when someone disrespects you. Your peace doesn't shatter when life changes direction. You become grounded within yourself. You become someone who cannot be manipulated with silence, guilt, or withdrawal. You become someone who no longer begs for attention or validation. You become someone who demands respect simply by the way you carry yourself. You become the kind of person whose presence alone commands stillness, not because you are loud, but because you are whole. Buddhism teaches that the only true freedom is inner freedom. The freedom that comes from knowing yourself, trusting yourself, supporting yourself, and valuing yourself. When you reach this state, you no longer chase people, you no longer cling to unhealthy attachments, you no longer fear being alone. You know that everything you need to survive, grow, and flourish already exists within you. This inner knowing makes you powerful in a way that nothing else can. Life can shake you, but it cannot break you. People can leave you, but they cannot weaken you. Circumstances can challenge you, but they cannot control you. You become the mountain, steady, silent, unmoved by storms. And here is the most beautiful part of this lesson. The moment you stop looking for someone to save you, you start attracting people who match your strength, not your weakness. You begin meeting people who respect your boundaries, who value your presence, who appreciate your independence. You begin forming relationships built on mutual strength, not emotional dependency. You begin inviting love, friendships, and opportunities that align with your highest self. Because now, you are no longer searching from emptiness, you are sharing from fullness. This is the deep truth life wanted you to learn all along. You were never meant to be saved by someone else. You were meant to rise by discovering the power that was already inside you. And once you fully embrace this truth, you transform into a version of yourself that is unstoppable, unshakable, and deeply at peace, because you finally understand you are and have always been enough on your own. When you look back at everything you've survived, everything you've carried in silence, every person you've lost, every night you spent alone questioning your worth, every moment where life forced you to walk without support, you will realize something profound. None of it was meant to destroy you. Every experience, even the painful ones, were shaping you into someone stronger, wiser, calmer, and more aligned with your true path. Life was never pushing you down. Life was pushing you inward. You were meant to discover who you truly are, without the noise of the world telling you who to be. You were meant to learn how powerful you are when everything familiar is stripped away. You were meant to see that the people who left were not taking pieces of you. They were leaving behind the space you needed to rebuild yourself. Every loss carved strength into you. Every ending freed you from an illusion. Every betrayal sharpened your intuition. Every disappointment purified your path. Every lonely chapter revealed the truth that you kept running from. You are capable of standing alone. And now, you finally understand why you had to walk through so much darkness, because the version of you that exists on the other side is someone who cannot be shaken by anything or anyone. This new version of you does not depend on others for validation. This version of you no longer begs for love, attention, or approval. This version of you no longer waits for someone to come save you. You have become your own sanctuary, your own healer, your own protector, your own guide. Buddhism teaches that true strength is not loud or aggressive. It does not need to dominate or prove itself. True strength is quiet, steady, deeply rooted. It is the strength of a mind that no longer fears loss, the strength of a heart that knows how to let go, the strength of a spirit that trusts life even when it doesn't understand it, the strength of a soul that has learned to sit with pain, listen to it, and rise from it untouched. This is the strength that has been forming inside you through every lesson in this journey. You now understand that walking alone is not a curse, it is a blessing. It is the path of those who are being prepared for something higher than ordinary. When you have no one to lean on, you learn to lean on your own wisdom. When no one understands you, you learn to understand yourself. When no one shows up for you, you learn to show up for yourself with a level of loyalty that transforms your life. And when you reach this level of self-mastery, the world no longer intimidates you. People no longer control you. Circumstances no longer break you. You become someone who moves through life with clarity, peace, and unshakable confidence. You did not become strong because you had support. You became strong because you didn't. You did not find peace because life was easy. You found peace because you learned how to remain centered when everything was falling apart. You did not grow because someone held your hand. You grew because you learned how to hold your own soul with stability and love. This is the kind of strength that cannot be given. It must be earned. It must be lived. It must be forged through silence, solitude, heartbreak, and rebirth. And now, as you stand here wiser, calmer, stronger than you have ever been, there is a truth you finally understand with your entire being. You were never alone. You were being guided toward yourself, because the strongest version of you was always waiting deep inside, buried under fear, doubt, and attachment. Life simply had to clear the path so you could finally meet them. And now that you have, you are unstoppable. You know your worth. You know your direction. You know your peace. You walk alone, but this time you walk with purpose. This time you walk with strength. This time you walk with a heart that cannot be broken and a spirit that cannot be defeated. You have become the person you once needed. You have become the person your future depends on. You have become someone the world cannot shake.